I am not afraid of death. Tesla once said, alone in the dim silence of his lab. I only fear that the light will come before I have time to share what I've seen. Einstein was different. He never spoke of death. He wrote of time, of light, of equations that wove the fabric of existence. But in the trembling lines of his final pages, he left behind one quiet sentence. If consciousness does not die, then we have misunderstood reality for centuries. They never sat together, at least not in this world. Tesla, the solitary dreamer, the man who heard invisible waves from the cosmos. Einstein, the mathematical giant, the one who glimpsed the mind of God through the curvature of space. Two paths that seem to diverge entirely. But what if, in some other dimension, where time no longer flows, but folds into a circle, their souls could speak again, as if they'd always known one another, as if they both had once stepped through the final door? Imagine this, an old room, no electric light, only the soft glow of dusk through a cracked window. Outside, the wind moves gently through the leaves. Inside, two old men sit across from one another. No pretense, no science to prove, just a single question passed between them. What remains when this body no longer does? This is not a debate. This is a return, a quiet conversation between two minds, between light and formula, between frequency and awareness, about the one thing neither dared to speak aloud while alive. What is the soul, and does it go on? The room has no door, no clock, only light, soft as breath, gentle as memory. In this space, two figures sit facing each other. No names, no silver hair, no silent decades trailing behind them. Only consciousness. Two fields of resonance once called Einstein and Tesla, now present as deep, quiet essences, meeting not by chance, but by a silent appointment written long before either was born. Tesla speaks first. His voice doesn't echo from a throat, but pulses gently through the subtle plane between souls. I once thought death was a release, but now I know it is a doorway, neither opening nor closing, just a shift in frequency. Einstein looks at him, unsurprised. He simply smiles, then responds slowly. All my life, I searched for God through equations, and when I came closest, there were no formulas left, only light. A long silence follows, not awkward, but necessary, as if silence itself were part of the conversation. For minds once filled with galaxies no longer need to prove anything. They only need to listen. Tesla closes his eyes, sensing something beyond language, then softly says, when I touched the invisible currents, I didn't just see light. I saw memory, not mine, but of souls never named. I couldn't explain it while I was alive. Einstein nods. His gaze shifts toward the invisible behind Tesla, as if seeing time folding itself into a single loop. Perhaps Tesla, what we call the soul, is not something that lives in us, but something we borrow this body to carry through the world. Tesla lifts his head. His eyes hold no questions, only silent confirmation. Then he asks, do you believe consciousness exists independently of the brain? I no longer believe, Einstein answers. I know. They fall silent again. But this time, the silence has a heartbeat, as if the universe itself is breathing. And there, in a room that doesn't exist, two minds, two paths, two opposites of the same question have finally met, not to find an answer, but to understand this. Truth only reveals itself when both logic and intuition sit down and listen. Tesla looked at Einstein. His gaze no longer carried defiance, nor the weight of a misunderstood inventor. It was simply the look of someone who had walked through the dark and now had the courage to name it. Did you ever truly believe, Tesla asked, that when the body dissolves, there's nothing left? Einstein didn't respond right away. He looked down at his own hands, which now held no physical form. And yet, he could still feel being something still new, remembered, breathed, even without lungs, blood, or nerves. I used to believe, Einstein said slowly, that consciousness was just a byproduct of electrical impulses in the brain. But then I began to observe the spaces between the equations, and I saw they knew I was looking. Tesla tilted his head gently. The empty spaces, that's where God whispers. I used to hear it in the vibration of air, between two lightning strikes, but they called me mad. Einstein smiled, a smile no longer tied to lips, but radiating through the shared field of awareness where both souls sat. They called me a genius, but perhaps I was just too timid to speak what I felt I knew. They both turned their attention not to a physical point, but toward a shared field of remembrance, a collective knowing where an unspoken truth waited. We both felt something on the other side, but neither of us dared open that door while alive. Tesla inhaled, though he had no lungs, and said quietly, "Once I dreamed. I stood before a gate that couldn't be opened by hands, but only by the frequency of the heart. Beyond it was light, not blinding, but soft like an embrace. I think that's where we go when we die." Einstein said nothing for a long moment. Then he closed his eyes, and when he opened them, if one could still call them eyes, they reflected entire galaxies. I once thought death was an ending, but now I see it's just a conversion of units, like light becoming energy, or a formula transforming into poetry. Tesla placed a hand on his chest, a gesture no longer bound to flesh, but rich with meaning. Then, if consciousness lives on after death, does it still feel? Does it still remember? Does it still love? Einstein whispered. I don't know for certain, but I believe the only thing we carry with us through that door is the love we gave freely, without needing a reason. The room grew even quieter, not because the conversation had ended, but because both were now listening to something far larger than themselves, not a theory, not a science, but the echo of their own souls. A question asked lifetimes ago returned again, and this time no one turned away. Is there anything that remains after death? And the answer was not spoken. It lived in their presence, right here, right now, a long silence. The room, if it could even be called, that seemed to grow translucent. In that space, Tesla lifted his head, looking at Einstein as if he had just heard a very familiar frequency, one that had been hidden across an entire lifetime. Have you ever wondered, he asked, why we remember things no one ever taught us? Why sometimes we know something before it even happens? Einstein nodded gently. Consciousness doesn't reside in the brain. It's not a product of neurons. It's a being temporarily dwelling inside a body. Tesla stood not with physical legs, but with the intention of movement. He moved toward a place with no walls, no ceiling, just a field vibrating with invisible frequencies. He raised his hand. In his palm appeared an image, a human brain. Millions of synapses flickered like a miniature galaxy. They think the brain generates consciousness, but this is only the modulator, a device that amplifies and filters like a radio. If the radio breaks, the music doesn't disappear. We just can't hear it anymore. Einstein looked at the image. He smiled, not out of surprise, but from the quiet affirmation within. I suspected as much, especially while studying quantum paradoxes. Particles don't behave predictably until there's an observer, and that behavior isn't in the particle. It's in the relationship between particle and perceiver. Tesla nodded. We don't create reality, but we tune how it appears. And the tuner doesn't sit in the brain. It lives in the field of awareness surrounding the soul. Einstein reflected, if that's true, then when the brain stops functioning, consciousness doesn't vanish. It's just that the receiver has been switched off. He raised his hand, drawing an imagined image in the air, a wave endlessly transmitting, passing through the atmosphere. Beyond even time itself, waves don't die. They just need a device to be named. Tesla continued, and if the soul is the broadcaster, the brain is merely a temporary antenna. When the body fades, the signal returns to the source. A place without boundaries, only frequencies. Einstein closed his eyes. I used to think death was disappearance, but now I understand. It's merely a temporary disconnection from physical mechanics, not from the self itself. No one spoke for the next few minutes. There was no need, because what they had just said was no longer theory. It was recognition through experience. No more doubt, only a truth so gentle. It could only appear when you stop trying to grasp it. I think, therefore, I am is no longer enough. Now I know. I am, even when I no longer think. The light in the room dimmed, then glowed again, as if the space itself was breathing along with the story they were telling. Tesla looked up into the undefined. The night sky opened above them, though they were in a place with no ceiling. Above, billions of shimmering points flickered. They weren't stars. They were frequency bands moving, expanding, alive like souls continuing their journey in silence. Light is the only thing that doesn't die, he said, because it needs no destination. It only needs to be sent, and it will always exist. Somewhere in the field. Einstein tilted his head gently. But light also has frequency, and there are bands our eyes can't see. Tesla smiled. That's exactly what I've always wanted to tell the world. If the soul is light, then death isn't disappearance. It's just leaving the visible spectrum. He raised his hand. In front of them, the air shimmered into a moving image, a wave of electromagnetic frequency, slow and fluid. Beside it, a human breathing, and then a soul gently separates. But it doesn't vanish. It just transitions to another frequency band. Einstein stared, as if listening to music from that image, like ultraviolet light, still there, still affecting us, but unseen. Tesla spoke softly, and the afterlife might just be a region in the spectrum where light no longer needs a body to carry its message. It simply keeps broadcasting. Einstein closed his eyes. A formula emerged in his mind. No paper, no pen, just intuition. E-F. Energy is proportional to frequency. The higher the frequency, the more refined the energy. If consciousness is a form of energy, then the afterlife is simply a higher energy state, unbound by gravity, no longer defined by mass, but by light. Tesla turned back, his eyes carrying something that felt like remembrance. Once, I nearly died from a fever. In that dream, I felt myself rising like a wave, and I heard not sound, but melodies that came from nowhere, yet I understood them. When I awoke, I knew that place was real. We just need a different frequency to return to it. Einstein asked gently, "Are you afraid to go there again?" Tesla shook his head. "No, because if I am light, then there's nowhere I cannot go. And if I am frequency, then death is only a shift in wavelength." They both looked up to the glowing field above, where souls moved like music. No words, no form, only vibration. Einstein whispered, almost to himself, "Death is not silence. It's a melody so refined, only the soul can hear it." The space around them began to shift. Walls dissolved. The ceiling became a moving dome of sky. Layers of imagery appeared, as if the universe was rewinding itself. A child touching their mother's hand for the first time. An old man watching the sunset, with eyes that knew he was about to leave. Someone quietly forgiving. Someone quietly loving, without asking for anything in return. All of it. These moments, replayed like wordless films. And strangely, They weren't coming from outside. They were rising from within themselves. Tesla spoke first. His voice echoed from far away, not through the vocal cords, but through a layer of memory deeper than personal recall. Do you feel it, Albert? As if every thought we've ever had, every love, every regret is still intact, just vibrating on another frequency. Einstein nodded silently. I used to call it the information field, but I never considered it might be alive. Tesla walked slowly, surrounded by memories, not his own, but of distant lives, yet he could feel their pain, their joy, and their awakenings, as if he had lived them himself. I call it the cosmic memory field, a place where every soul that's ever existed leaves a vibration. No emotion is ever lost. No prayer ever vanishes. Einstein lifted his hand. A sequence of equations appeared in the air, but this time, they didn't resolve into a number. They spiraled into a helix like DNA, but not biological. Perhaps this is the place that stores not only biological data, but soul data, the structure of every lifetime. Every unfinished idea, Tesla smiled, like a vast library, not built of bricks, but of light and intention. The two walked slowly through the invisible space. Around them, images emerged, not in chronological order, but each memory carried its own distinct emotional frequency. Warmth, cold, longing, asha. Einstein stopped before one image. A man quietly lighting a candle by the window. In a city sinking into war. I don't know who he is, he whispered, but I understand him. Tesla nodded. Because all souls are connected. When we transcend the physical self, we don't just remember ourselves, we remember everyone. Einstein gazed deeper into the field. Then maybe death doesn't erase us. It simply returns us to a shared archive, where every soul continues writing a collective symphony. Tesla spoke softly, and the soul doesn't die. It simply becomes a note in that eternal melody. They stood in silence, not because there was nothing more to say, but because they had begun to hear the voices of countless souls passing through them like wind, like light, like invisible streams of data, carrying the wisdom and emotion of all humanity. Einstein stood still. Before him, a wave of light was dissolving, then reforming, then dissolving again. Nothing was lost, only rearranged, like a melody when the notes are played in a different octave, but still echo the same song. Tesla stepped closer, his hand passing gently through the wave of light, not touching, yet sensing, not seen with the eyes, but with awareness. I used to think death was a dividing line, but here I see it's more like a process of reconfiguration, not destruction, just transformation. Einstein nodded, slowly, steadily, like when ice melts into water and water becomes vapor. Nothing disappears. It only leaves its previous shape. He raised his hand. A simple equation appeared. E, mi si do. I once believed this formula spoke only of matter and energy, but now I see. It also speaks of consciousness. Tesla added, if energy cannot be destroyed, then surely consciousness, the subtlest form of energy, cannot simply vanish after death. It only slips out of fixed form, like a song being played on a different instrument. An image appeared before them, a body slowly dissolving into a stream of light. No pain, no resistance, only acceptance, as if the soul had always known this truth. But the physical body had never been ready to understand. Einstein gazed deeply at the scene. I used to fear that when I died, all my memories, questions, love, would disappear. But now I see, they don't vanish. They return to the original field. Tesla asked, and what about the individual? The I, does it still remain? Einstein paused for a long moment, then said, the ego is a temporary shape, like the crest of a wave on the ocean. When the wind stops, the wave dissolves, but the water remains. Tesla smiled, not with sadness, not with regret, just a deep knowing. Then death doesn't erase us. It simply returns us to our original essence. Behind them, the light began to shift, not receding, but transforming from a single stream of brightness. It became millions of spiraling strands, like strands of light DNA, and within each spiral, a consciousness, a journey, a soul dissolving, breathing, returning to its primordial state. Einstein whispered, "If someone asked me now what death is, I wouldn't say it's an ending. I would say it is when we are taken apart to return to the truest structure of who we are." The space around them began to darken, not because the lights were turned off, but because the light was folding in, as if the universe itself was bowing down to listen to what was about to be said. Einstein looked at Tesla. His eyes no longer held the spark of curiosity, but the quiet of a man who had spent a lifetime only to realize he had forgotten the most important thing. We measured light, split the atom, listened to waves from the edge of the cosmos. But perhaps the closest, most essential thing was the one we left behind. The soul was never considered because it didn't produce data, but life was never meant to be data. Tesla sighed, a breath no longer moving through lungs, but traveling across space through the vibration of regret. When I was alive, they laughed when I spoke of brainwaves, of the frequency of emotion, of the energy fields surrounding the human body. They wanted to prove everything with metal and math. But the soul doesn't emit voltage. It emits presence. Einstein nodded. I, too, was afraid to speak what I felt, afraid to lose the respect of academia, afraid they'd assign me to some spiritual camp. So I chose silence, and I'm not sure if that was the right choice. In the distance, an image appeared, a modern laboratory filled with devices and blinking screens, but no people, only unanswered questions that no one had yet dared to ask. Tesla looked at the scene as if peering into the heart of humanity. We've built an entire civilization on logic, but we forgot emotion, forgot intuition, forgot the most immortal part of us, the vibration of love and longing. Einstein whispered, perhaps the greatest mistake of science was treating the soul as an illusion, when in truth, it's the very reason we began asking questions at all. A soft light spread around them, not brilliant, not boastful, just the quiet return of a final truth. Tesla spoke slowly. If we cannot measure the soul, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It only means we're not ready yet. Einstein replied, and if science rejects something simply because it can't explain it, then science is no longer a journey of discovery, but a wall that blinds the soul. A silence settled, not one of sorrow, not of regret, just a voiceless whisper. We've traveled so far outward into the world that we've forgotten the way back in. No more images, no more sounds, only a field of light soft as breath, and a strange sensation expanding around them, not coming from outside, but like a memory, ancient and whole, that once was everything. Einstein spoke, but his voice was no longer made of words, only a vibration that moved directly into Tesla's heart. I once believed that everything could be reduced to energy, could be explained by formulas, but then I realized I could never write an equation for love. Tesla smiled gently, because love doesn't need to be proven. It only needs to be present. They were no longer standing, no longer bodies, just two fields of resonance merging together within a realm of light beyond time. And in that union, they both saw moments when love was offered without expectation. A father quietly holding his child's hand in the dark, a wife waiting, though no promise was made, a soul sacrificing itself for another, needing no recognition, not grand, not glorious, just real. Tesla whispered, if the soul carries a frequency, then love is the final one, so high that nothing can distort it, so strong that nothing can erase it. Einstein nodded, his light rippling like the surface of a calm lake. And if only one thing remains after death, it won't be fame, it won't be knowledge, it will be the love we gave without needing it returned. A stream of light enveloped the entire space. There was no more Tesla, no more Einstein, no more two souls, only one frequency, echoing through the universe. Love does not die, because it never belonged to the visible world. It is the language of the soul and the truest nature of the cosmos. The conversation had ended, but what had been awakened in the hearts of those listening was only beginning. Not to believe, but to remember, not to debate, but to hear that very gentle voice within, whispering, I am not this body. I am the one who loved, who loves, and will go on loving, even when there is no one left to call me by name. If you're still here, sitting quietly with the soft light at the end of this video, perhaps you too feel. We've just witnessed something that cannot be named, not an interview, not a science lecture, but a reunion between two souls in a place where all boundaries dissolved and only the truth remained. You may not remember every word. You don't need to, because the soul doesn't need to remember. It only needs to recognize. And if, in some moment, your nose tingled with emotion, your heart paused, or something deep inside you stirred like a string that had long been silent, then maybe you too have just returned to yourself, to the part of you that is still alive, even after death. Einstein and Tesla did not leave us answers. They left us a door, and that final whisper was not meant for the mind, but for those ready to listen with the heart. Don't fear death. Fear living in a way that forgets what remains after you're gone. Love, compassion, light are frequencies that never fade. And if you've ever been moved by something invisible, maybe you've already heard the voice of your own soul, live as if your soul is recording every moment. Love, as if nothing can be taken with you except the frequency you leave behind. Love doesn't die. It only changes form and waits for you on the other side of the light. If this encounter touched something deep inside you, leave a whisper in the comments, because who knows, you might not just be speaking to yourself, but helping another soul remember something they've been searching for. Until we meet again in another reality, or perhaps in this very one, but with eyes that now see through the light within. Protect the light. And if you can, pass it on.